All right, so welcome everyone to Cascadia Composers Monday Night Presentations. And this month we have David Jones, who's fairly new in the area, so Rice University graduate, and he's going to talk about his orchestra composition. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to David.
Alrighty, thank you, Ted. Um, so let me share my screen with y'all real quick. We just did a sound check, so this should all still be working right. Um, so, um, thank you all um, for joining me tonight, and to anyone watching this after the fact, thank you for watching. Um, I'm really excited to share this piece. Oh, that works. There we go. I'm really excited to share this piece with you guys. This was my dissertation composition. This is the final project for my doctoral degree. It's titled "Nothing So Exquisite." Uh, I graduated from Rice University almost 2 years ago now with a Doctor of Musical Arts in Music Composition. Um, this piece was a great adventure for me. I really enjoyed writing this piece, and I especially was throughout the process. I was grateful that my degree only required me to write a 10-minute orchestra piece and not a 100-page paper or anything like that. As my dissertation project, I would much rather write music than write a giant research paper any day of the week. Um, so, Nothing So Exquisite is a tone poem for large orchestra, um, after the tradition of the orchestral tone poems of Richard Strauss, Franz Liszt, and many others. I should mention also, this piece was premiered last February, not 2 months ago, but a year and 2 months ago, by the Shepherd Symphony Orchestra. That was the good deal they had, for graduate students was, your dissertation composition was an orchestra piece, and then their top orchestra performed it the year following your graduation. So it was a fantastic opportunity. They're a phenomenal orchestra. You'll hear them a little bit later on in the presentation. Um, so this piece is programmatic, and meaning it follows an extra musical narrative. While Strauss's tone poems tend to be large scale single movement works, clocking in at 20 to 30 minutes each in length, this piece is somewhat condensed in length, clocking in at only around 10 minutes. So, Nothing So Exquisite depicts the spiritual conversion of a man named Alma. His life and teachings are recorded in the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ. I'm a member, and all my life I've been a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. By way of explanation, we in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believe the Book of Mormon to be a sacred volume of scripture, comparable to the Bible. During the reign of King Zedekiah in Judah, around 600 BC, we believe that a small group of people fled Jerusalem before it was destroyed by the Babylonians, and were led by the Lord, via ship to the American continent, and started a new civilization there, a civilization called the Nephites. The Book of Mormon, named after a Nephite prophet historian named Mormon, hence the name Book of Mormon. It's a compilation of the records and prophecies of these people, the Nephites, and we believe it to be the Word of God. just like the Bible. It's an additional volume of scripture in addition to the Bible. Um, Growing up in the church, Alma's story has always been one that's close to my heart. He's commonly referred to as Alma the Younger to differentiate him from his father, known as Alma the Elder. Alma's life is similar in many ways to the life of the Apostle Paul in the New Testament of the Bible. The Apostle Paul, as many of you probably know, has been the inspiration for a lot of music and literature and artwork. Most notably, Heinrich Schütz's polychoral motet in the 17th century called Saul, was verfolgst du mich? Or Saul, why persecutest thou me? When I was writing this piece, I actually considered just kind of borrowing Schütz's work and just changing the name. Alma, was verfolgst du mich? But I ultimately decided against that because that would be plagiarism. Anyway, so Alma, like Paul, begins as an active, zealous opponent of the Church of Christ, persecuting its members, reviling against its teachings, and seeking to lead the people away. And one day, while he's going about attacking the church, he is confronted by an angel and commanded to stop. He ultimately repents of his sins and devotes the remainder of his life to the service of God and becomes an important leader of the church. This is the text that I based my piece on. This is his description of his conversion experience. He describes it as follows: "For I went about seeking to destroy the church of God. But behold, God sent his holy angel to stop us by the way, and behold, he spake unto us, as it were the voice of thunder, and the whole earth did tremble beneath our feet, and we all fell to the earth, for the fear of the Lord came upon us. But behold, the voice said unto me, Arise. And I arose and stood up and beheld the angel. And he said unto me, If thou wilt of thyself be destroyed, seek no more to destroy the church of God. And it came to pass that I fell to the earth, and it was for the space of 3 days and 3 nights that I could not open my mouth, neither had I the use of my limbs. But I was racked with eternal torment. For my soul was harrowed up to the greatest degree, and racked with all my sins. Yea, I did remember all my sins and iniquities, for which I was tormented with the pains of hell. Yea, I saw that I had rebelled against my God, and that I had not kept his holy commandments. Yea, and I had murdered many of his children, or rather led them away unto destruction. Yea, and in fine, so great had been my iniquities, that the very thought of coming into the presence of my God did rack my soul with inexpressible horror. Oh, thought I, that I could be banished and become extinct, both soul and body, that I might not be brought to stand in the presence of my God, to be judged of my deeds. And now, for 3 days and for 3 nights was I racked, even with the pains of a damned soul. And it came to pass, that as I was thus racked with torment, while I was harrowed up by the memory of my many sins, behold, I remembered also to have heard my father prophesy unto the people concerning the coming of one Jesus Christ, a Son of God, to atone for the sins of the world. Now, as my mind caught hold upon this thought, I cried within my heart, O Jesus, thou Son of God, have mercy on me, who am in the gall of bitterness, and am encircled about by the everlasting chains of death. And now, behold, when I thought this, I could remember my pains no more, Yea, I was harrowed up by the memory of my sins no more. And oh, what joy, and what marvelous light I did behold! Yea, my soul was filled with joy as exceeding as was my pain. Yea, I say unto you, my son, that there could be nothing so exquisite and so bitter as were my pains. Yea, and again I say unto you, my son, that on the other hand, there can be nothing so exquisite and sweet as was my joy. Yea, methought I saw God sitting upon his throne, surrounded with numberless concourses of angels, in the attitude of singing and praising their God. Yea, and my soul did long to be there. As I mentioned, Alma's story has always been important to me, but what struck me about it as I reread it early in the fall of 2020, when I was beginning work on this piece, what struck me about it was the immediate and complete transformation from one extreme of emotion to another. The moment Alma allows Christ into his life, his exquisite pain and torment are transformed into exquisite, transcendent light and joy. His horror at facing God's judgment is instantaneously replaced with a longing to enter his presence. A bitter enemy to God is transformed into a valiant force for good. I wanted to try to capture some semblance of that sublime transformation in this work. My work follows Alma's account pretty closely. It begins by introducing the proud, rebellious character of Alma before his conversion through a jagged, dissonant theme presented by the reeds and solo strings. At a certain point, a little bit later, the angel appears with his voice of thunder, represented, of course, by the bombastic timpani and bass drum, because besides maybe a thunder sheet, how else are you going to depict thunder? As well as at that moment, there's a quotation in the trumpet from an LDS hymn called "I Saw a Mighty Angel Fly." In the section that follows, marked authoritatively in the score, the angel makes his declaration to Alma in unison horns and cellos, and Alma collapses in fear, hearing no more. The next section depicts Alma's tortured state as he wrestles with the guilt of the crimes that he's committed. After a little bit of a developmental section focused on this state of torment, he remembers his father's teachings about Jesus Christ, which in my piece these teachings are represented by offstage trumpets performing a Kyrie chant melody. The melody is presented first softly in the trumpets, and then taken up emphatically by the rest of the orchestra as Alma's mind catches hold of the thought of Christ, and he cries out in desperation. Now, historically, this melody was not written yet during the time that this story takes place. And, we don't have any record of what music actually sounded like in Alma's time. But even still, I included this Kyrie melody because the Greek words of the plain chant, Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy, seems to me to be a powerful way to express Alma's emotional state as he begs the Lord to have mercy on his soul. After Alma's desperate plea comes to a head, a great calm follows as Alma's pain is healed. Alma's soul is gradually filled with light and joy, leading up to his transcendent heavenly vision. So, to sum all of that up, Nothing So Exquisite is comprised of 4 major sections. As a programmatic work, it's of course through composed, but there are elements of it that resemble a traditional sonata form. So the beginning section can be considered an exposition of two major themes that recur throughout the work. The first I'll call Alma's theme, because it represents Alma's rebellious character before his conversion. So Alma's theme. Oh, and I should make sure. Can you all? Let me just try this out here. Can you all hear my piano?
Yes.
Excellent. So here's a bit of Alma's theme. The second main theme is the Angel's Declaration, which goes something like this. Okay, it sounds much more heroic and intense played by horns than played on my little electronic keyboard here. But anyway, the tormented section begins with an imitative treatment of the angel's theme that we just heard, as if the angel's words are still echoing through Alma's mind as he contemplates his doom. What then follows is an extended development of Alma's theme, the first theme that we heard, which grows increasingly agitated. And just as Alma starts to lose hope and resigns himself to his fate, the offstage Kyrie comes in. So here's the original chant that I'm making a quotation of in my piece. It's a very famous Kyrie, which goes Kyrie eleison. In my piece, this melody appears somewhat modified in my piece, like this. So I transposed it to better fit the range of the trumpet, and I also modified a few of the notes just because I liked the sense of modal ambiguity that's created by inflecting some of the tones. So then here at the kind of turning point, Alma's theme is transfigured. Its dissonant, biting character that we heard at the beginning is replaced with consonance, tranquility, and determination. The angel's theme also makes a return during the final section, and its character is likewise transformed, becoming more victorious and triumphant and heroic, rather than menacing and terrifying as it appears at the beginning. The most dramatic transformation that takes place in the piece is the treatment of Alma's theme, which is a little bit easier to see when we take a closer look into how the melody is constructed. I apologize, this next section is going to get a little bit technical, but hopefully some of it will make sense. Before I started writing the piece, I started by constructing a 12-tone row. I don't always I don't always write using 12-tone technique. Those of you who went to my recital a couple of weeks ago know that a lot of my music is fairly tonal or uses somewhat conventional harmonies. I'm a big fan of quartal and quintal and secundal harmonies in my music. But sometimes I find writing with a tone row, I find it to be a useful technique sometimes in generating and organizing material in a piece of music. So my row that I wrote sounds like this. As I was constructing this row, I wanted to create something that contained harsh dissonances, but which had the potential to be transformed into something more beautiful and consonant. I decided, at least in the beginning of the piece, to always present this row in two voices locked in one-to-one counterpoint, thereby grouping the 12 tones harmonically into 6 dyads. And so as I composed Alma's theme, I assigned these 6 dyads to rather disjunct, angular, syncopated sorts of rhythms. And so this was kind of the result of that. Here's my 12-tone matrix. So this lists all of the possible transformations of this row through transposition, inversion, retrograde, and retrograde inversion. The most important transformations of the row to me in writing this piece were these ones. The principal row here at the top, which we just saw. I9, or the inversion transposed up 9 half steps. R6, or the retrograde transposed up by a tritone, and Ri3, the retrograde of the inversion transposed up by 3 half steps. If you'll notice, these row forms are all linked by common dyads. For example, here on P0, the last 2 notes of P0 are F and A flat, and then the first 2 notes of I9 are A flat and F. Likewise, here with the last 2 notes of I9 are D and B, and in R6 the first 2 notes are D and B. And so each of these 4 row forms are connected by those common dyads. And technically, because each of those row forms can be read backwards, there are 8 possible row forms that are connected in this way. What I found by following and using these 4 linked row forms in a loop was that each of them contain many of the same dyads, just presented in different orders. For example, if we look at P0 and Ri3, these contain the same set of dyads, just presented in a different order. Here's P0. And then Ri3 is... So it's the same groups of 2 pitches, the same 6 dyads, but just presented in a slightly different order. I don't know, there was something satisfying to me about using these limited, more limited materials. And then I used the common dyads at the beginnings and ends of these row forms in order to link these row forms together to form continuous melodies. For example, Alma's theme is constructed by linking P0 together with I9 using that common A flat and F. And then with the rhythms that I assigned to it, then it sounds as I played for you before. One additional technique that I use to generate material from this original row, because the theme is presented with these two voices in lockstep, one voice sounding like this, and the other voice sounding like this, the bottom voice. What I did was combined these two voices in order to create another 12-tone row. If we look here, these are these first 6 pitches are the top voice being read forwards, and then the last 6 pitches are the bottom voice but reading backwards. And so the two voices meet in the middle of this new derivative 12-tone row that I created. So the result of this derived row sounds more like this. So then this new derived row created some additional melodic possibilities as I was constructing the piece. There's, for example, after we in the piece, after we hear Alma's theme for the first time, there's a counter melody that comes in the basses, and this counter melody is constructed using R3 of this new derived row, and that sounds something like this. Something like this. Anyway, so you could say that the original row is the harmonic row because it's continually presented grouped in dyads like we saw earlier, while this derived row could be considered a melodic row because I used it to primarily, one pitch at a time to construct some of the melodies in the piece. Now, that all being said, I will also mention that while much of this piece is constructed using these 12-tone rows, I didn't use it for all of the piece. The angel theme the angel theme that happens, for example, is freely composed, using some of the same interval content, but it's not strictly following this row. I felt it was appropriate that the angel doesn't speak using the same harmonic language that Alma does. And then, of course, the quotations that come in later in the piece, the Kyrie and the brief hymn, are modal or tonal. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. That's all great, David. But what does that all have to do with Jesus? Well, I'm glad you asked. One thing that I think is important about the concept of redemption and transformation is that even when a person repents of their sins and is born again in the Spirit and becomes a new creature through Christ's atonement, they're still the same person. Alma and Paul alike, after becoming converted to the Lord, they were equally zealous in their efforts to further the Lord's work following their conversion, as they were in their efforts to destroy the church before they were converted. the idea of being born again isn't that our personalities are completely replaced by something foreign to what we were before. Rather, Christ's atonement lifts us to reach our full potential, to become a better, more perfect, complete version of ourselves. And so, accordingly, I wanted the last section of the piece, when Alma's pains are washed away and replaced with joy and light, to be based on the same material as Alma's theme in the beginning, but more complete, without the biting dissonance that affected it before. So, the primary reason I chose to present the row in dyads in the beginning was to provide an opportunity for those dissonant, relatively dissonant dyads to become a framework for a more beautiful, more complete harmonic progression. And so I treated each dyad as a framework for a triad or seventh chord. You see in this first dyad we have D and B, and so if you treat those as the third and fifth of a triad and add G also in that triad, then it creates a G major triad. E flat and B flat together, if you add a third to that, could be an E flat major or an E flat minor triad. Anytime I had a second or a seventh, then I treated those as the root and seventh of a seventh chord. This one I filled out with a C and an E to become an A minor seventh triad, or sorry, A minor seventh chord, and so on. And so the each of these dyads became the framework for complete triads and seventh chords. The result is something more like this. It's the result is something more lush and less dissonant than the original, although still quite chromatic and distinctive. This, of course, is only one possible interpretation of the framework. The triad qualities of these fifths are variable. This could be an E flat major or minor chord. This here, the B and D could be interpreted as the third and fifth of a triad, as I have here, or it could also be the root and third of a triad and could form a B minor triad instead, for example. The transformation takes place during the Kyrie segment in about the middle of the piece, and at this point, Alma's theme is recapitulated at about at the same pitch level and with approximately the same rhythmic profile as we heard it in the beginning. It's placed in counterpoint to the Kyrie melody that's ongoing in the rest of the orchestra. It's played by the brass instruments at this point. But in this instance, each dyad is fleshed out now to form complete triads and seventh chords. I'm going to attempt to play this. It's a little hard to play just on the keyboard, but here's a try. Sorry, that last bit is especially thorny to play on a keyboard, but the transformation reaches its culmination after the climax, when the strings, in a moment of stillness, the strings present the theme, but now in a new peaceful chorale-like fashion, sounding more like this. As this section proceeds, the progression continues to follow the tone row through the 4 linked row transformations mentioned before, growing more fluid and confident as it goes. As the music swells into the local climax, depicting Alma's transcendent vision at the end of the text, his vision of heaven, the progression modulates briefly to a new set of linked row forms. It begins on P5 instead, with E and G being interpreted as a C major triad, then proceeds through I2 by linking B flat and D flat together, and then proceeds through the rest of I2 before coming back to P5. In fact, it actually only uses those two row forms before it then modulates back to the original set for the last 9 bars of the piece. So, in conclusion, the concept of redemption and transformation is represented most significantly in my piece by treating a tone row as a bare bones harmonic framework with missing information, and then later coming back and filling in that information to create a complete harmonic progression. Hopefully that gives you a better idea of what was going on in my brain while I was writing the piece. I'll go ahead and play the piece in its entirety for you now. Do you guys have any questions before we dive in? Great, let's hear it. So that's it.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Well,
Wonderful.
Thank you.
David, a question I would have is, did you have enough rehearsals and more than one performance of the work at all down at Rice?
I just had the one performance that they played the whole piece through during the dress rehearsal. Um, uh, Rehearsal time. They gave me. Um, we had two rehearsals plus the dress rehearsal, which and it was a Monday rehearsal and a Wednesday rehearsal, and then the dress rehearsal and concert on that Friday. So um, they spent a pretty good amount of time on it, and I felt like they. Um, so I also submitted this piece to be read by the Aspen Conducting Academy Orchestra, and they gave it their the old college try. They did a pretty good job with it, but they had a lot less rehearsal time to work with it, and that performance was not as successful as this one was. So, by comparison, I felt like I had ample rehearsal time for this one.
Okay. Okay.
David, I'm curious is there I don't know how to put this exactly. Um, is there a kind of a culture, the culture at Rice, the sort of the aesthetic or compositional culture? Was there pressure for or against using 12-tone techniques? Is it pretty free and open, or what kinds of directions are emphasized, and maybe if there are other directions that are kind of not paid much attention to there. I mean, we just kind of give a short picture of that if you could.
Yeah, I felt I didn't feel any particular pressure to go one way or the other. um, I felt like the environment there was pretty open, and the professors that I worked with were very encouraging, whatever direction I decided to take my music with. They were my when I studied there, I didn't study with just one professor the whole time. They had us switch professors every year. Um, One professor that I worked with, Kurt Stallman, in particular, was very good about simply just peppering me with questions about about what my motivations were behind writing a particular way or not, and questions about what my ideas were for like the overall form and whatnot, and what the what the implications for doing something a certain way might be, but without trying to push uh, a particular musical or stylistic agenda, which I really appreciated.
You must have heard um, uh, several other people went through the same thing, right? They were all having their PhD pieces performed
Mm-hmm.
and different kind of stuff. What kind of aesthetic range did you? I mean, was there minimalism? Was there what kind of range did you hear in the PhD pieces, for example?
Yeah, well, there's a pretty wide um, aesthetic range, I'd say. One composer there that I graduated with, uh, his name's Erbek. Um, Erbek Erimlez. He's a Turkish composer, and he admitted in a seminar once that he's got a little set of pieces that he uses for applications to get in the door, but then the type of music that he really loves to compose is Turkish folk music, or music based on Turkish folk music. And so his dissertation piece was very much in that same vein. It was very, very energetic. It used even some samples of Turkish folk music that played along with the orchestra at a couple of different points. So there was so there was that side of it. One of the other there were 4 pieces on that program. One of the others was very much more of a John Luther Adams sort of style, where it's very much into timbral exploration, not necessarily a lot of very active material, but a lot of just kind of exploring the different sound worlds that are possible with an orchestra. So it was a pretty wide range stylistically.
Well, I very much enjoyed the sort of the harmonic turmoil, and yet it was in your piece, and yet it was not. I mean, I think especially in the early days of 12-tone writing, when people were first exploring it, and then later on in mid-century, you reach a point after I reach a point after 4 or 5 minutes where I think, okay, I don't need to hear any more of this. You know, it's fine. It's fine. I'm not complaining, but I'm going to go listen to something else. I didn't get that with your piece. You kept, and especially these harmonic things that happen towards the end. Of course, I'm a fool for any kind of harmonic kind of phenomena and stuff, and so I just really appreciated that, and also just the drama throughout. I mean, it never felt particularly forced. I mean, there was an organic. I felt there was an organic development going on. It didn't feel episodic or choppy. It just held my attention all the way through. I'm not sure I'm quite convinced by the final chord, but that's okay.
Well, thank you.
I like what you did with the orchestration, and I wondered, did you have people looking over the orchestration, giving you some kind of advice or aid in how you scored it?
Yeah, definitely. So my final year during after I was finished with coursework and was working on this project full time, I was working with Art Gottschalk, and so he was kind of my primary mentor, and he helped a lot with the orchestration. The late Larry Radcliffe, who directed the orchestra at Rice for a number of years before he passed away. He also took a look at it and just kind of tore through it. He tended to be a little bit belligerent toward us composition majors, and just make us feel absolutely terrible about everything we wrote.
They got to toughen you up for the real world.
Absolutely, but he had a lot of good things to say, and a lot of good things, mostly talking about the balance and balancing the various forces together. And you can't have the trombones playing fortissimo there; you'll never hear anyone else. One of his closing thoughts in my session with him was, "Nothing so exquisite? Yeah, there's nothing so exquisite about this piece." And I'm just like, "Oh, thanks, Larry." But anyway, but yeah, so I got a lot of guidance from various professors about the orchestration. Pierre Jalbert was also on my defense committee, and he at my thesis defense, which, by the way, that you guys just heard my thesis defense presentation. Congratulations. But he gave, he's a just really masterful orchestrator, and so he gave a lot of really good thoughts on the orchestration at my thesis defense, which I was able to make some adjustments for between then and the premiere.
That was very nicely done. Very.
Thank you.
The orchestration. When I had students at the master's level, I would tell them, I'd help them with their stuff, but I would also tell them to study specifically 2 scores that had to be just a world of everything in it. And they would be the Mahler First and the Mahler Second Symphony.
Mm.
And those extraordinary works just reveal, once you get into them, just an imagination and a skill that is, to me, beyond belief.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
I've performed I've played second horn in Mahler's First Symphony.
oh, did you?
While I was an undergrad. Fantastic.
That had to be a
I
good.
love that piece.
I thought you were going to say the first and the fifth.
I have to tell you, David, I was all about the fifth. I studied the fifth one, Mahler's Fifth. That's tends to be my personal favorite, but yeah.
Also,
Not too shabby a piece. No.
Right.
Just imagine writing the way he wrote for strings in the adagietto of that. If you look at his score, and you see the stunning imagination of what he deals with in the strings there. Forget the harp, but just the strings is mind-boggling.
Now, come on. What about Debussy? What about Stravinsky? What
Well,
about Firebird? Come on.
They're all different. They're all different. I learned, from all of them.
I've got to put in a plug for Respighi.
Oh, all right.
Iggy, okay. He's a cool guy too.
Ravel, come on. Let's not forget
Ravel.
Ravel.
Ravel is in the movies, yeah. Ravel is stunning. Anyway,
So much great stuff.
Yeah.
yep.
Thank you very much. We really enjoyed this.
Thank
Yeah.
you for listening.
Thank you, David. And I like the last chord just fine.
Well, we're gonna have a debate about that in the next. No, I'm kidding. I probably just need. I almost wished that. It's just a little silly to say this now. Yeah. I almost wish that you had played the piece through at the beginning, and then talked about the detail, and then played it again. But I just this will be up online, and I can listen to it at my leisure, and so I can sort of do that for myself.
It's available on my YouTube channel as well.
I saw it on your YouTube channel. Thank you.
Oh, by the way, as a sidebar, David, I don't know if I responded to you, but I did get the video, and I plan to get that up online sometime in the next several days. The video from your concert.
Excellent. Thank you.
And thank you so much. Very detailed uploader's notes. That's just beautiful.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you.
David, a question I would have also would be, you would have a ton of things to say in program notes for an audience. Would you expect any of them to be able to gravitate toward any kind of program when they hear a piece like this? Without the program notes, or even with the program notes?
I tried my very best to still have it be cohesive and dramatic with or without the program notes. I think without knowing the program notes, someone might wonder why it started out so dissonant and disjunct and finished out, oh, that's a triad. What's going on? But I tried. That was a challenge as I was writing the piece, was how do I create cohesion between what happens at the end and what we heard before, and these two very different sound worlds that happen within the piece.
I like program notes. And sometimes I listen and then read and back and forth. And when I provide them in even my most simplest pieces, some people read them, some don't. And even a simple piano piece, oh yeah, now I get it, or something. I think that there should be some explanation. Yeah.
They enhance the
Yeah.
understanding of the piece. I mean, I don't think in your piece, I don't think you need them, but they enhance the experience.
I think so. Yeah. I can listen to a piece without program notes but I do like them because I'm a perpetual student anyway. I just
Hmm.
like detail.
I know some composers um, who refuse to read the program notes at at a concert. They'll just like completely ignore the program and they just want to experience the music as it is. But I
Yeah.
find them helpful when I'm listening.
That's pretty much me. I always will bring the program notes home, read them the next day. At night when I'm back home, I rarely read program notes at a concert. So
Yeah, the online concerts, where people talk beforehand, I usually fast forward through like to get to the music.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And then, if I hear something that's like especially puzzling, then I could always go back and listen to what they said about it. And that's the great thing about stuff being online. You miss some you miss some aspects, but you gain some others.
Mm-hmm.
okay.
I'm going to go. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Christina.
I'll get back to you about our.
Thank you, David.
Okay. Thanks, Liz.
I got an lab book.
Oh, good.
I'm going crazy. I was on a 3-hour tech session today. Anyway, so I'll see you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, David.
All right.
All right, thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, David. Wonderful.
You all.
Very much enjoyed it.
Have a good night, everyone.
You too.